Lovecraftian games are really booming these days. The tag is used on Steam to describe many games, but sometimes this tag is used a little too freely if you ask me. I mean, what the hell is this? Steam has just begun their summer sale, going from June 24th until July 8th, and as such, a lot of games are heavily discounted. So I figured it would be the right time to make a video highlighting some of the games Steam will recommend to you as being Lovecraftian, and give you my impressions of them. If they're good, if they're worth your time, or to skip them unless they're going for really dirt cheap. So get out your credit cards and let's find some good Lovecraftian games to play. The Penumbra series. Let's start off with the top one. The Penumbra series consists of 3 games, all worth getting. Overture, Black Plague, and Requiem. All are tied together in a narrative, so you kind of should play them all and play them sequentially as well. It is a first-person horror game with little to no combat at all, very thick with atmosphere and horror, that being psychological and cosmic horror. The games are somewhat dated by today's standards, but I feel that they really strongly hold up if you don't really give a damn about having the cutting-edge graphics. And especially the narrative and the atmosphere holds up. The developers, a Swedish team, clearly are fans of Lovecraft, as the game's engine, that being the software used to run the game, is called the HPL engine. Pretty cool. Anyway, this is definitely a top pick in my book. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Another game from the Swedish developers I just mentioned, and also built on a more polished HPL engine. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is infamous at this point. You play as Daniel and, well, what a coincidence, you have amnesia. You make your way through a dank, dark castle and things just get sicker and more twisted as you go on until the final conclusion, which I'm pretty certain Lovecraft himself would give thumbs up to. There are multiple endings, and it's the type of game where it's not so obvious as to the correct solution. The atmosphere is second to none, and the aesthetic would not be foreign to a Lovecraft fan at all. Picking up Amnesia is also worth it due to the large and active modding community, and this goes for Penumbra too. There are even some mods which are specifically designed for Lovecraft fans, such as The Shadow of the Ram Lord and Eldritch Cove. Due to this, you'll get a lot of value for your investment. There are 2 sequels to Amnesia titled A Machine for Pigs and Rebirth. I've played the former and skipped the latter due to trilogy syndrome. You know the one, the first entry is amazing, the second one is like, it's okay, and the third one is neither here nor there. The Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. The granddaddy of Lovecraftian games. If you haven't played any Lovecraft games before, this is a treat. Although it has aged a bit and does need a patch to work out a couple of bugs, the atmosphere and original story is really good, the music is perfect, and the replay value is very high. The story is that you play as a detective with a shoddy memory of what exactly happened in the past, and then it transitions briefly to a sort of loose adaptation of The Shadow over Innsmouth, but then the story starts to do its own thing, and the story, it's really good. If you don't mind playing an Xbox, that being the first Xbox era game, and fiddling with an easily installed patch, then this is definitely a game you have to play as a Lovecraft fan. Eldritch. This is an odd little game. Firstly, it's one of these games where each playthrough sees the environment altered, so each playthrough is unique. I think they call it roguelite, if I'm not mistaken. The art style is very much like Minecraft and pixelated to hell, but it's done intentionally and it is kind of stylish. It's set in various levels taken from Lovecraft stories such as the Mountains of Madness, underground grottos like you would see in perhaps the festival, and caves and libraries, this type of stuff. You fight a host of enemies from the mythos too, from cultists to fishmen and lots of things with tentacles. The tone of the game is somewhat goofy, but it does have a good atmosphere and it is a fun time to play and seems to have a solid fan base as well. Moons of Madness. I did a let's play of this game and was thoroughly impressed by it. A first-person horror game, you are in the somewhat distant future working on a semi-colonized Mars when something is discovered. The game is heavy on atmosphere, has the right amount of scares and develops nicely with multiple endings. If you haven't seen my let's play or you forgot about it and the narrative is not so clear in your head anymore, I really recommend this game. A lot of people praised it and said it was one of my better let's plays. Not because of my skill, but because of the story and the game. So this is definitely one to go for if you like a space theme plus a lot of cosmic horror. Elder Sign, Omens. This game is never on sale, but you can pick it up for about $6. It isn't the deepest of games and does rely on the roll of the dice to progress, which makes me never truly trust the computer to be random. However, in its favor is great art and sound design and enough strategy elements that you aren't just throwing the dice and hoping for the best, but relying on your own planning to win and taking into account the random chances. It's released by Fantasy Flight, which is also the company that is releasing Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror. As such, this game is also available as a board game. However, due to the simple nature of the game, I would say rather get it on your cell phone or tablet to play rather than on a PC. It doesn't seem to be fitting the PC format, if you get my meaning. The Call of Cthulhu, the official game. This is another game that I've done as a Let's Play, and as I've said of Moons of Madness, if you've not seen it or you forgot the plot enough, then this is a great game to pick up. It's very strong in atmosphere and pacing, with some fun gameplay aspects I've not seen often in other games. You play as a detective with a drinking problem who is given the case to solve of bizarre occurrences in an Arkham-type small city involving cultists, monsters, and the sort. The game has multiple endings, but all depend on how you behaved during the game. The ending I got left me truly stunned, and I just sort of sat back in my chair and was like, wow. So it really is a great game to pick up. It's not the most polished, but the narrative and the atmosphere is really on point. The Sinking City. This is another game I did a Let's Play of, and this one I'm listing now to tell you to avoid it. The game is okay on the surface and the trailers make it look really cool, but the actual gameplay is very, very tedious. It's a third-person perspective semi-sandbox / open world set in a city which has been flooded, turning it into a sort of New England version of Venice, what with the need to travel around with a boat. The gameplay is tiring and boring at times, many pointless side quests that you need to complete, fetch quests that contributes nothing to the narrative, and the grasp of the mythos is dodgy, though you do see some interesting characters. And the cherry on the top that makes this game kind of suck is that the developers seemingly had a real-world political agenda to push. Euclidean. This is a very trippy kind of game, perfect if you have the VR headset for Steam. The game, from the first-person perspective, shows you in this dream planetary environment like you dropped acid on your school trip to the planetarium. You are essentially tasked with falling through time and space, I assume it's time and space, and avoiding various objects which, if they notice you or you hit them, ends you. It is quite atmospheric, and I've never seen a game like this before, but it's not the most in-depth in the terms of gameplay, but for the price, why not? It's a good experience. Conarium. This is a great game from Turkish developers, I believe, set in some Arctic wasteland where you play as a researcher waking up to find everyone disappeared. It plays from the first-person perspective and is more focused on walking and puzzle solving, but I don't see that as a bad thing since the narrative is very key, and the narrative in this game is quite good. The storyline is solid and it makes sense, and apparently there are 2 endings, though in my playthrough I only saw the one, but apparently the second one, well, it's quite a divergent one. I think this game is definitely worth the price and your time, and once again, like all the other games with a heavy narrative, if you haven't seen my playthrough or you forgot my playthrough and the narrative, then definitely this one is enjoyable. Lovecraft's Untold Stories. I'm quite fond of this game, to be honest. It's a retro-styled combat game with RPG elements which sees one of a few playable characters take on the usual hordes of enemies you'd expect from the Lovecraft mythos. The game is also randomly generated, I believe, so each playthrough will put everything in a different location, so you still have to pay attention when you play. You cannot just go through on your second or third round with sort of like on autopilot. The game doesn't have too much depth or narrative, but the gameplay is very fun and there's a lot of fan service. There is enough strategy needed that you cannot just run around like it's a shoot 'em up or something like that and nothing more. It's an ideal game if you want to play some mythos themed game but don't want to think too much, and I mean that in a good way. Sometimes you just want to shoot cultists and chill, you know. The Chronicle of Innsmouth. This is a fun game by an Italian developer which is done in a 90s style Secret of Monkey Island art style, which I love. The game is, as you guessed, a loose adaptation of the Innsmouth tale but injected with a lot of humor, just like Monkey Island was. And if you're a bit younger, Monkey Island was a series of games from the 90s which was really cult iconic from the time. At times the puzzles in this game are a bit obscure, but it doesn't take away from the enjoyment of the game too much at all. There is a sequel called Mountains of Madness which has improved graphics, more gameplay depth, and a bit more of an original storyline despite the name. It's not just copy-paste from At the Mountains of Madness. I'm planning to play it this weekend, so no comment on it yet. I should also take this time to mention The Shadow of the Comet and Prisoners of Ice. If you want another 90s style PC game but actually made in the 90s, check out these two games. Not much to say about these games as I've not really progressed very far with them. They do seem legit and good early attempts at Lovecraft's mythos, but without the humor of the Chronicle of Innsmouth. So again, if you want something light-hearted and fun and relaxing, the Chronicle of Innsmouth and probably its sequel, Chronicle of Innsmouth Mountains of Madness, is the game for you. The Shore. This is a recent game which got a fair-sized media push to promote it. A first-person perspective game, you wake up as a man with amnesia on a misty New England-looking island with no idea of what's what except you need to find your lost daughter. I've done a whole Let's Play on my channel for this game, but if you didn't see it, in short, I will say that while the visuals and the design are great and the start of the game is very promising, it really flops in the second half, and the shoddy grasp of the mythos lore cannot be hidden by the beautiful visuals. Besides this, the game itself has some rough edges regarding gameplay, like it doesn't feel good to play the game, I could put it like that. The controls, things like this, and I even basically rage quit at the end because the cheap deaths just got over and over again and it was just too much. Still, some people thought it was an okay game, so I will at least mention it here, and I can see that the producers of the game had their heart in the right place, so I can at least help them here with a promotion. Somewhat of a promotion, I guess. Anyway, The Song of Sire. I would be in deep error if I didn't at least bring your attention to this, though I have only played maybe 5 to 10% of it so far. It might put you off that it is one of those Japanese games where the only gameplay is really clicking the mouse to progress the text beneath the various scenes. Normally this sucks as a game, personally, but since in Lovecraft games the narrative is key, it works just fine. The game has gotten amazing reviews and very positive feedback, and as I said, though I played only a fraction of it, I'm still saying it is good enough for a Lovecraftian to enjoy. As long as you're okay with that, it is more of a visual novel than a video game. So it's one of those where you get something nice to drink, sit back and enjoy a story. The Innsmouth Case. I got excited to play this game when I saw the trailer for it. It looked like a fun little game that didn't take things too seriously. Kind of again like the 90s Secret of Monkey Island. And it looked enjoyable to play. However, the first thing that came up on the screen after installing the demo was a goddamn warning label about how bad and problematic Lovecraft is and how the developers are trying to be better progressive allies, so to hell with them. Avoid this one, lads. It's not worth the money.
Hey, cocksucker. Please?
Wait. Wait is a game I got a while ago because of how cheap it was on a Steam sale, though now it doesn't seem to be on sale. Nonetheless, the higher price tag I think is worth it. It is done in the 16-bit style of a Super Nintendo RPG, which is great if you're a retro gamer. It mixes elements of Silent Hill into the storyline, but is mostly focused on Lovecraftian aspects. You don't fight any real enemies or such, but focus more on puzzles and figuring out the slightly off-center weird things occurring around you. Dreams, time loops, things like that. It's pretty cool and I really enjoyed playing it, and it really was surprising because you wouldn't expect something with that much depth considering it's presented in a 16-bit art style. So yeah, it's worth looking at least. The Darkness Within series. This is a two-part series, the first being a point-and-click game, the second allowing you to move around properly in the first-person perspective. You play as a police detective in both cases, investigating really messed up scenes typical of Lovecraft's writings. It kind of has that feel of the Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth at times. If you don't like point-and-click games, at least check out the second game, and for such a low price, why not? Alien Isolation. This is a massively successful game in the Alien franchise and lovingly made. I watched a documentary on YouTube about how they went about making this game and researching the films to make this game accurate, and the attention to detail is absolutely stellar, to the point that the game feels more fitting and relevant to the Alien canon than anything that came after Aliens. What's it doing on a Lovecraft list? Well, many people label the film Alien as being very Lovecraftian, and this video game, Alien Isolation, perfectly fits the narrative and the feeling and the atmosphere of the first Alien game. So I definitely need to add it to this list. It's highly recommended, even though I guess it's not strictly Lovecraftian. I guess, well, that's a debate for another day. Moving on. Little Nightmares. To me, this game evoked Thomas Ligotti greatly, more so than Lovecraft. Everything is so bizarre, misshapen, and throughout the game you feel that there is no escape from this bizarre world which, though at times is slow-paced without any direct threats, feels very, very hostile and sick. There is definitely a sense of cosmic dread in this game, but as I said, it feels more like Ligotti than Lovecraft, but Ligotti is amazing, so I still recommend this game. There is a sequel which I haven't played yet, but looks just as amazing, as well as a lot of DLC, I understand. The art style and the sound is very beautiful, and the lore of the two games is extremely well written. I watched a video explaining the lore and the way the two games are written together. It's just amazing, and you can really see that this was a passion project. Lust from Beyond. How do I recommend this game without sounding like a pervert? Imagine a sex-focused Lovecraftian horror mixed with the art of H.R. Giger and, excuse me, this is a Polish name, Zadislaw Bekzinski. It's quite sexually graphic and twisted, and this may raise some eyebrows, as well as raise some other things, but hear me out. You play as an antiquarian minding his own business, running a little store, when you're dragged into a sex cult, get pulled into a nightmare realm which they worship, and eventually, well, you kind of lose yourself to it all. Is that how it ends? Not quite, but the story and the narrative is quite satisfying. Despite the graphic sex, which there is, it serves a narrative and an actual purpose in the game, so it's not sort of sexploitation, as it were. It's not out of place. I did a let's play of it on one of my side channels, the Innsmouth Gazette, so click the link on the screen to go check it out. This game is a sequel to Lust for Darkness, but I played that one a little bit, but I think that this game is much better, and you don't lose too much backstory by playing only this one. It also has two sort of side, shorter DLCs to it, so there's that going for it, and it's a good investment. And again, I stress that although, yeah, there's quite graphic sex scenes, and I know how squeamish Lovecraft was about sex, but somehow it just works. It really does work, and they really did well. I think they're Polish developers, actually. Anyway, a good game. Moving on. Darkest Dungeon. This is a hardcore game. This isn't a game you play casually. It's a turn-based strategy game where you go through dungeons, and it's simple as that, but it's truly challenging. There is a bunch of DLC for this game if you end up loving it, but for me, I just wasn't too much into the game because I don't like turn-based fighting games. It's just not for me. The art style is very beautiful, and the music is also quite well done, and the narrator for this game is someone who's going to be probably familiar to you. It's Wayne June, the guy who has done a number of very well-made audiobooks on YouTube that are available if you just search for Wayne June Lovecraft. Very recommended. Arkham Horror, Mother's Embrace. This is a very new game and one I mentioned in one of my newsletters, but this is not a recommendation. In fact, I'm listing it as a warning. The game is apparently very buggy, very rushed, and isn't enjoyable at all. People have reported many technical issues with it, and though I've not played it, pretty much every review is listing these issues as being a sort of real dampener on the game, and it's just making it not worth your cash, so I'm just letting you know. Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones. This is a game I think I made one video about long ago when the demo was available only. The game has a unique art style and story setting, but has a turn-based combat system, and as I said, I don't really like those much. I'm listing it here because many of you have recommended it to me, so maybe it's a game for someone who doesn't really mind turn-based fighting systems. So that's my list of recommended and some not recommended Lovecraftian games for the 2021 Summer Steam Sale. Anyway guys, thanks for watching and your time, and I hope you find something enjoyable to play, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.